China is crucial to our economic health, is it not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Frydenberg, will you sign up to the Belt and Road Initiative? Daniel Andrews has joined?
Well, we've always made the point that those sort of arrangements, the state government should be looking to the federal government for the lead.
So what's the lead?
Well, the lead is that we welcome investment from China in our country.
Will you sign up to Belt and Road?
Well, we've participated in some international negotiations with China, but what we want to ensure is that we welcome investment into this country, but we also play our role, particularly in the Pacific, in helping to support investment.
Well, Mr. Bowen, will you sign up to Belt and Road?
So we've made it clear that we regard Belt and Road as something that we will examine, one, in the national interest, with a clear-eyed view to our national interest, and two, on a case-by-case basis. So we're not proposing to sign up, as other countries have, but we will look at it in the national interest.
Are you, Mr. Bowen, do you believe Labor is in a better position to deal with China?
Look, I think the most important thing about the relationship with China, Neil, is, if possible, it should not be dragged into the domestic political debate.
Well, who's doing that?
Well, it has been dragged in by the Liberals in the past. They've said we're tougher on China, or et cetera, et cetera.
I don't think that's a fair.
Malcolm Turnbull did. In fairness, I don't think Josh has.
Well, all right, but let's be frank, Mr. Bowen. Do you accept China's got a deplorable record in dealing with Australia? Deplorable. When they hack into our parliament, they try to fiddle our political system. They lock up our citizens without trial.
I'm actually trying to say, of course, there'll be differences with China under a government
differences.
of persuasion.
2 million people in concentration camps.
We have different political systems and different value systems. But you open the conversation by pointing out how important the bilateral relationship is.
Yes, that's my question, though. Do we have to tolerate?
Josh and I agree with.
I agree. Do we have to tolerate the behaviour of China because of the trade?
No. Our policy should always be guided by our values and our interests as a country. The point I'm making is that it is best if political parties do not beat each other up over China and say, I'm tougher on China than you are.
Agreed, Mr. Frydenberg?
Well, I believe in having a very constructive and productive relationship with China. They are a key partner for Australia, particularly in trade and increasingly in investment. We have secured a free trade agreement with China, something that I don't think the Labor Party was as enthusiastic about as we have, but that has created thousands of jobs across the agriculture sector, the resources sector, in trade, in tourism, across the board. Now we have more than 1 million Chinese visitors coming to Australia every year. We have a number of Chinese students. This helps create jobs in our economy.
Does that mean that we have to turn a blind eye to some of what they do?
We always take actions that are in our national interest.
Do we support them locking up to 2 million people in what amount to concentration camps?
But
we turn a blind eye to that?
Raising legitimate issues with China is not mutually exclusive from having a productive and constructive relationship, which our government's committed to.
We banned South Africa for a lot less.
Well, we have a very important and constructive relationship with China. Our Defence Minister and our Foreign Minister were recently there. I've met with my counterparts over different portfolios in China, and it's really important that we maintain this strong relationship.
Okay, well, I'll ask you both, sort of related. Mr. Bowen, do you support a bigger Australia? Immigration's a key part of the economic mix as well.
Look, I think that the immigration rate will be very similar, regardless of who is elected. It's been bipartisan, really, for 40 years now, that the majority of our immigration should be skilled, with a smaller family reunion component, and that the immigration rate should be set annually based on the best advice of the economic agencies, including not only the Department of Immigration but the Treasury and the Department of Industry, as to where the labour shortages are. We should be investing more in skills for our young people so that we can take some occupations off the skill shortage list, which enables better immigration or higher immigration. But in terms of the broad immigration debate, I think there is much more bipartisanship than difference.
Okay. So what's your figure?
I think Chris is saying one thing to you and I today, Neil, and another thing to the Labor conference, because actually they proposed an increase in the humanitarian intake, which wasn't properly.
No, I was talking about.
Which was it's
talking about immigration.
Well, it's all about numbers coming to Australia. Now we have a really generous humanitarian intake, which we've increased. We've stopped the boats coming, and that took tough action again, which the Labor Party
let's focus on immigration. And on bipartisanship on immigration level.
Well, we've announced our policy on immigration, but I do support immigration, multiculturalism. I think that contributes to a strong, more prosperous and harmonious Australia. But what we failed to do at state and federal level over successive governments, Liberal, Labor, and over many years is, I think, properly integrate the planning that is needed. Okay. And that is what Melbourne is really suffering from at the moment. 2,000 people a week coming into Melbourne, putting real pressure on transport, health and education services.
Mr. Bowen, Mr. Frydenberg just touched on it, but you will lift the refugee intake and you also increase family reunions. What's it going to cost?
86 million over the forward estimates.
$6.5 billion, thank you very much.
Josh, stop making figures up, mate. It does you no service. I mean, as I said to you the other day,
contrast it with real facts, please.
Josh, you get to announce Liberal Party policies. I know you don't do it very often because you don't have many, and I announce Labor Party policies.
On the day
right? you don't get to announce Labor Party policies, all their costings.
On the day you played follow the leader. On the day
congratulations, you managed to come up with one policy in a 4-week election campaign. Mate, well done.
I'd like you to follow our tax cuts, but
after 6 years in office,
in the opposite.
After 6 years in office, you came up with a policy.
While we're on policy, Mr. Bowen, you're putting $10 billion into the suburban rail loop here. Have you seen a cost-benefit analysis on that?
Look, I think that's a very good project for Melbourne. State government does the planning, etc. We think it's a very...
Is there a business case done yet?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure
there is.
Sorry, there's not.
Well, are you saying that it's not a good project for Melbourne?
No, I'm asking whether there's a business case done.
Well, the state government has proposed that, and we are convinced by its merits, and we think it's worthy of a Commonwealth contribution.
But have you seen a business case?
Those big sort of city-changing investments only really happen when Canberra gets involved.
But have you seen a business case?
Well, we're convinced that it stacks up.
By what? Daniel Andrews?
By the case put to us, yes. By the case put to us by the Victorian State Government, absolutely. And if Josh wants to argue against it,
Mr. Frydenberg,
he's.
Do you argue against it?
Again, this is all about the politics for the Labor Party. You know, they put out their costings last week. $10 billion was missing for this particular project.
But do you argue against the rail loop?
I argue. I'd say we need to sit down with the Victorian government. There needs to be the cost-benefit case, and we need to see all that information. Then we would welcome an approach after that has been done.
What about your own $4 billion for East West Link? I mean, the state government's rejected it, and so the business case doesn't stack up.
Well, Neil, as you know,
and it's rejected twice.
As you know, it's been supported at the last two federal elections when we've taken it to the Australian people. We know that on the eastern suburbs of Melbourne have not been a priority for Daniel Andrews. We also know that the road would have already been built if he didn't pay $1.3 billion of taxpayers' money to not build the road. We also know that there's 100,000 people who will be in their cars on that road in just a few years' time.
How are you going to pay for it?
How are we going to pay for it?
Where's the costings?
Well, it's a contingent liability, as you know.
Hang on.
We want Daniel Andrews to approve it, and then the money will flow.
It was not in the budget, Josh. You know that. Simon Birmingham told a fib about this morning and said it was in the budget because it was in the contingent liability reserve. You know as well as I do that does not hit the budget bottom line. It's not included in your figures.
Okay.
I released our costings last Friday. When are you releasing yours?
Can I just ask a question on the underground loop, on the rail loop, because I haven't been trying to work this out. How many underground stations are there going to be? Do we know yet?
Oh, I'd need to refer that to the state government.
Yeah, I don't think that's decided, which is why I'm puzzled by the costings.
Well, I mean, it's a big project which will be delivered over a long period of years. All right.